Next two events on God's prophetic timeline are a peace agreement in the Middle East and World War III. Will new elections again postpone the revealing of Trump's deal of the century? And how close is a nuclear war in the Middle East? I will provide an update on the current peace efforts and the potential for a future nuclear war on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and thank you for joining me for this edition of End of the Age. Now, I know it's on everybody's mind. What in the world is the new Israeli elections? Unprecedented, two elections in 1 year. Imagine having that here in the United States. We'd be going out of our minds. Two elections in Israel in 1 year. What's that going to do to the peace agreement? Well, at this point, it's all speculation, but we're going to get into it and give you a few scenarios of how it could possibly play out over the next few months and maybe a year or two. And then we'll talk about World War III. The next two prophecies to occur on God's prophetic time clock are the World War III, the Sixth Trumpet War, and a peace agreement that will start the final 7 years. The Bible does not tell us which one happens first, but we know that they are the next two events to occur on this huge timeline that God has given us in the Bible. So let's start off with the peace agreement. The Bible foretells a final 7-year period that will immediately precede the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. It also describes the specific event that will mark the beginning of that final 7-year period. And that's the reason we call this prophesied event the prophecy with a date on it. The Bible sets the date, not us. So all we have to do is watch for the initial event, which is this peace agreement that marks the beginning of that timeline, to then know that we only have 7 years remaining until the culmination, which will be the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. So all the way back in Daniel 9:27, 2,500 years ago, it prophesies that the Antichrist will confirm a covenant with many for a final 7-year period. And that agreement, that accord, would be a confirmation of God's covenant with Abraham that Israel would always have a homeland in their promised land. That's all the way back in Genesis 15:18. And the fulfillment of this prophecy is going to be the signing of a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And the prophesied peace agreement must do 4 things. Now, we'll go over these many more times before this occurs, because we want you to be able to recognize the peace agreement once it's signed. And we'll recognize it by these characteristics. Number 1, it will establish a Palestinian state in Judea, the modern-day West Bank, or at least an autonomous, a self-governing situation in that region. Number 2, it's going to allow Jewish settlers that presently live in Judea to remain in their homes, living as a Jewish minority in that new arrangement. Number 3, it will place the Temple Mount under an internationally supervised sharing arrangement, which will allow both Jews and Muslims to worship freely there. And then number 4, it's going to allow Israel to build her third temple. When we see a peace agreement signed in the near future with those characteristics, then we can get on the radio and say, look, folks, the final 7 years has just begun. And then it's going to be Katie bar the door at that point. I mean, come on. We'll be on every news station you can think of. talking about this, and we're going to, we're sending out a magazine to every home in Israel. A lot of things are going to happen once that final 7 years kicks in. So when you are watching the news, watching the internet, whatever, however you get your information, when you see that prophesied peace agreement take place with those characteristics, then you can know assuredly that the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ has just begun. Now, the question is, why am I bringing this up today? Well, because the Trump administration is getting ready to roll out their deal of the century, their version of a peace agreement. There have been many peace agreement efforts throughout the many United States presidential administrations. And some of them have been successful. The Y River Accords, the Oslo Peace Accords. But they were not the one to start the final 7 years because they didn't have all of these characteristics. And so now we're wondering, hey, will Donald Trump's peace agreement, if it was to get signed, could that be the one? We don't know at this point, but you all know that in latter part of June, I think it's June 25, 26, they're going to have a meeting in Bahrain that will lay out the economic, it's going to reveal the economic portion of this peace agreement. And then, of course, at a later date, they'll roll out the political side. So we'll talk about this when we get back from the break. We'll talk about what's going on, give several scenarios, what's going on in the Middle East, because a lot of us are interested. And I've got several scenarios to go through with you when we get back from the break.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
Have you had a longing to visit the cities where Jesus healed, ministered, and taught every day? Judy and I would like to invite you to travel to the wonderful land of Israel. Experience the Word of God in vivid color while walking down the roads of the Holy Land with us.
When you are ready to experience Israel, we recommend you travel with Endtime Ministries. You will not only experience historical and present-day Israel, you will also learn about the prophesied future to come. It's as if we traveled back in time to visit a different era and discovered ourselves in an ancient time. The tour is very well organized, the accommodations are first class, and the food is delicious. If you have ever had a desire to visit Israel, there is no better time than now. Ann from Colorado.
To sign up to receive your Experience Israel 2019 packet, call Adrian or Jana at 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com. We can't wait to experience Israel with you.
So I'm going to get into many scenarios on what could happen as a result of Israel going back into elections. I think it's September 17, and what that will do to the peace agreement. And again, it's speculation at this point, but a lot of people are who are in the know are speculating about it. I'm going to go through some of those because we're all interested in that. Before I do, I want to announce that Irvin Baxter this weekend is going to be in College Station, Texas, to do a prophecy conference. He's going to be teaching Saturday, June 1st at 6 p.m., America's God-Given Destiny. That's at the Victory Church, 13107 State Highway 30 in College Station. And then on Sunday morning, June 2nd at 2 p.m., he's going to be at the same church, Victory Church. He's going to be teaching Breaking Prophetic Fulfillments Again, that's 13107 State Highway 30 in College Station. So if you'd like to join Irvin this weekend, Irvin and the team, I think Doug Norvell and his wife's going to be there. You can join them this weekend. Be a great prophecy conference. It's always a good time. And so join us and go through these lessons and have a spiritual experience as well. The conferences are always great, and it's geared towards introducing you to Bible prophecy, hear a great prophecy lesson, and above all, introducing you to Jesus Christ if you don't know Him. So join them with the prophecy conference this weekend. Sure to be a good time. Now, getting back into the peace agreement, because I want to get to World War III before this is over with. But the peace agreement, there are hundreds of news articles speculating. What is Israel going back into their second set of elections in 1 year? What's that going to do to the peace agreement that's due to be rolled out? Well, the Haaretz newspaper, they gave a great scenario, and they actually said, this was kind of what I was thinking, is that it was Kushner has awful timing right now. I mean, imagine, because the Trump administration has postponed the revealing of their rollout of the peace agreement many times now. And now we said, hey, we're going to go in there. We're going to deal with Netanyahu. We got this friend. We helped him get elected the first time. And Trump was very influential in getting him elected. And then we say, okay, now we're going to roll out the economic portion of this peace agreement here latter part of June. And then they go off into elections. So it's kind of thrown everything into turmoil here. And so the article states from the Haaretz that Netanyahu's political crisis could kill Trump's peace plan. So you say, well, I thought Trump's peace plan was the one that starts the final 7 years. At this point, we don't know that. But it is a peace agreement that's being dealt. They've done unprecedented things trying to get it passed. Jared Kushner and them have been in the Middle East. I'll talk about that here in a minute, trying to gain support for that. They have done that for over 2 years now. And so they've done many things that previous administrations have never done. They've tried a regional agreement, many things, to try to get it done. So the question is, what now for the U.S. peace plan? Well, Jared Kushner, like I said, is meeting with the top foreign officials this week in Morocco, Jordan, and Israel. Actually, he's going to end up in Montreux, Switzerland, and in London before he unveils the economic portion of his long-awaited Israeli-Palestinian peace plan during the conference next month. So he's all over trying to garner support for this. And Kushner's Middle East portion of the trip, it was planned long before Israel's current political crisis erupted. It was supposed to focus on one goal, and that was to bolster the economic peace conference that's scheduled to take place in Bahrain on June 25th and 26th. Of course, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, he failed to form a coalition by the deadline yesterday, and the vote was passed to dissolve the Israeli parliament. And, of course, they're headed to new elections on September 17th. Jared Kushner didn't know this when he started his trip over there. He thought he was going to have a whole different conversation with Netanyahu when he met him in Israel. But, of course, now Netanyahu is saying, I got to get reelected. And, of course, many people predict that he will get reelected because he's got the best chance of forming a new coalition and a new government. And so many people are going to reelect him. They feel very confident in him. The United States supports him. Everybody's seen that in the last elections. So it'll probably happen again. But if you understand Israel elections, they don't have just a Republicans and Democrats running. They've got a plethora of platforms and different political entities that run for office. And then when they get in, a certain one gets elected, which Netanyahu just did, but then he's got to form a coalition. He's got to form a government, and he couldn't do that in time. So now we're going off into new elections. The parliament dissolved. So the Trump peace team, led by, obviously, Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, it's facing a difficult decision. They promised to unveil the economic part of their plan in June, and then sooner or later to publish the political section. And now that Israel is facing a new general election, there is a question mark hanging over those commitments. And last September, at a speech before the UN General Assembly, President Trump declared that the peace plan would be presented by February of 2019 at the latest. And yet when Netanyahu dissolved his own government coalition last December, I mean, we're doing the same thing again, it led to the Israel elections on April 9. Well, the White House chose Netanyahu's political schedule over Trump's own timetable and delayed the release of the plan. Now we're headed right back into the same scenario. And, you know, no one is going to be shocked, really, if this newly declared Israel election leads to another delay, regardless of what the administration may say in the near future. The Israel National News, it did report that the United States, the State Department, released a statement and saying that they would not change the planned date for the release of the deal of the century, regardless of the political situation in Israel. But you and I both know that that's easier said than done now that we know Israel's headed into an unprecedented second election in 1 year. I mean, that throws everything in just utter chaos. But people are playing it cool and saying, hey, no matter what happens, we're still going to roll it out. Time will tell whether that happens or not. So a State Department official said Wednesday that the Bahrain conference is going to happen regardless of the developments in Israel. But does that mean the economic charter is still going to be presented? And what about the political part? Currently, no one, and I mean no one, I researched this stuff in and out till my eyeballs were about ready to fall out. No one has the answer to these questions. At this point, it is all speculation. Many people do speculate that it will go ahead and be released because they're tired of going along with the political schedule of Netanyahu, and that they're just going to go ahead and roll it out. But at the end of the day, they're trying to be strategic about it. And I'll show you some of the strategy here in a moment. The Jerusalem Post provided a very good speculative analysis of many of these scenarios. So let me just go down through here and you'll see what I'm talking about. If the Trump administration did not want to issue the plan in the middle of an Israeli election campaign a few months ago, because they're in the exact same situation right now, because it didn't want to complicate matters for Netanyahu, because the plan is expected to ask for concessions from Israel that are going to be unpopular to some that are on the right. And then that logic is certainly going to pertain, especially if we are now entering another new election. You see what I'm saying? We postponed it until Netanyahu was elected, and then we said, hey, we're going to roll it out. Now we're going back into elections. So the earliest that elections could conceivably be held, because, well, you'll see what I'm saying here in a minute, because it affects our elections here in the United States. The earliest that elections can conceivably be held now is at the end of August, with September 17th currently being bandied about. That's probably when they're going to have it as the most likely date. Well, then you got to add on another 45 days after that. Hopefully, a coalition is built, because then Netanyahu would have another 45 days. We just ended the last 45 days yesterday. And he would have another 45 days after September 17th. And hopefully a coalition would be built. That would bring everybody to the beginning of November. Well, guess what's happening here? So we would be getting ready to start Donald Trump's re-election bid for 2020. And now, while that may be a perfect time for Israel to receive the plan, it's not necessarily a great time for Donald Trump to present it, because by November 1st, the United States is in full throttle campaign mode for the start of the primary season in early 2020. So you can kind of see there's a lot of dynamics going on here, and they want to get the peace agreement done, but this new elections has really thrown everything a wrench in the transmission, if you will. So, history has shown that the successes that they have had, that the best time for American presidents to put forth a peace plan is at the start of a 4-year term, not toward the end of it. And even in the best circumstances, it's going to be difficult to get the Arab states fully and publicly on board any Trump plan, and impossible to get the Palestinians to even look at it, because that'll become even more difficult as the U.S. inches toward elections. Why? Well, because, for instance, would various Arab countries give the plan the type of, really, the embrace it would need to succeed, and as a result be castigated as a traitor to the Palestinian cause, not knowing if Trump is even going to be around in the 2020 elections to pay them back? In other words, we sign this peace deal, the Arab nations and the Palestinians sign on, the Netanyahu and the Israelis sign on, and they sign on with the Trump administration, and then let's say, hypothetically, Trump gets defeated in 2020. They're saying, well, we'll have, just about a year or so with this agreement, and then another guy's coming in. That's why a lot of them, and he won't be able to fulfill all of his promises. So that's why many administrations want to do it, roll it out in the beginning of their 4 years, not at the end, or at the beginning of their, the second 4 years if they get reelected. You understand? So that's a huge scenario that could play out, and it could really play into whether they even, the thing gets off first base here. Because, the 2 Israeli elections in 1 year, it's unprecedented. And that's what they're facing. So, another reason why the U.S. election calendar, which kicks off the election season as early as Labor Day on September 2nd, it really militates against presenting a plan, is because politically, Trump's going to have nothing to gain and really something to lose. As in the last elections, one key ingredient to a Trump victory in 2020 will be his enthused base, and the pro-Israel evangelicals. They were a critical part of Trump's base. And this part of the base, for the most part, is opposed to Israel being asked to make concessions on Jerusalem or in Judea and Samaria. I don't feel that Israel should make concessions or that they should be asked to, because I understand the prophecies of the Bible, and God said, don't make any covenant with the heathens. And so I don't believe they should sign a peace agreement. The Bible says they will, but I don't believe that they should. And so, but yet Trump, his advisors, they've already said that both sides will be asked to make concessions. And, what other concessions could he have in mind? That's a big question in people's mind. What is in this peace agreement? And then finally, is it possible that he could ask Israel to give up some of Jerusalem? I mean, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, but he's going to let them sort it out. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'll just have to see. I can't see him doing that, but stranger things have happened. And then finally, if Trump really wants the deal of the century to work, it's going to take a great deal of time and energy. Believe me, I mean, it doesn't happen on day one. It's not as if Washington drops the plan on the world and then steps away. That's not going to happen. It's going to necessitate intense involvement by the White House, including from the president, to shepherd the thing going forward. But Trump is unlikely to do that during an election campaign. I mean, you see, in his last election campaign, he was giving speeches, just about every other night somewhere. And for him to do that and then spend time on really focusing on this peace agreement, you kind of see the problem here. And, because Donald Trump's going to be busy campaigning, and second, because he's not going to get actively involved in an issue that in the end may fail anyway. And you understand, Donald Trump wrote The Art of the Deal. And if you're in business, you don't really walk into a business meeting and start asking questions unless you kind of know the answer to the questions already. That's negotiation. And so no candidate wants to go into elections with such a colossal, high-profile failure so fresh on their resume, because people can really get leery. I mean, would Trump's base, would some of that peel off if that happened? I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying that it's a possibility. These are scenarios that could play out over the next several months, maybe a year or two. So concerning the June 25th, 26th meeting in Manama, the capital of the Persian Gulf, the state of Bahrain, this is where many countries will meet to share their ideas, discuss strategies, and galvanize support for potential economic investments and initiatives that could be made possible by a peace agreement. Well, representatives and business executives from Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, including some finance ministers, are all expected to attend. So it's going to be very, very important. This is where they're going to roll out the economic portion of the deal of the century, the Trump administration's peace plan. The Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, all with the host country Bahrain, they've accepted invitations to attend. And this has fueled Palestinian jitters that they will come under heavy pressure to accept large sums of money in exchange for freezing and abandoning aspirations for an independent Palestinian state in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. So in accepting the invitation to the Bahrain Conference, Gulf countries they've been careful to express solidarity with the Palestinians, but have also signaled flexibility. So you can see that this peace agreement, they could roll it out and get it signed. There are many scenarios, but they could roll it out and it could fail. I mean, we really don't know at this point. It's all speculation. A lot of scenarios could play out over the next several months.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and lead them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So now you can see the questions going on in people's mind. You know, what's going to happen with the rollout of Donald Trump's peace plan? And the fact of the matter is that at this point, I mean, I'm just being honest here, it's speculation. I mean, because it could turn out that Donald Trump's peace plan isn't even the plan. Now, again, it is unprecedented. They have done things. They've tried to sign up get a regional situation going here where the Arab nations would get on board with it and then force or I don't want to say force, I mean possibly force, but to kind of coerce the Palestinians to come to the table and agree to a peace agreement. And then, of course, we have huge influence over Israel right now. So it is possible that it could be. But until we live through it, we will not know if this is the agreement. Now, I can tell you this. Once it's revealed and we see all the characteristics of it, and if those 4 characteristics that I mentioned early in the program, if they're included in the peace agreement and it looks like they're going to sign it, I mean, we'll be doing cartwheels through here. Not because I think they should sign it, but because if they do, we'll know that the final 7 years has just begun. And so that's something that we watch on a daily basis, everybody, is this peace agreement coming up. And, you know, the elections in Israel, it's really kind of throwing a wrench in it. But at the end of the day, you know, we simply don't know at this point. We're just given scenarios. It's all we can do. But we got to talk about it, because when it happens, it's going to be one of the most recognized prophecies in the entire Bible. And so, you know, we have to talk about it on a daily basis. And we just want you guys to be educated about it, because if you don't understand the prophecies of the Bible, it's like you're just walking through life and you're in a fog. So we want to kind of clear away the fog and say, look, here's what's coming. This is one of the next 2 events on God's prophetic timeline. And that's why we talk about it, you know, all the time. Number 2, the second prophecy is on God's prophetic timeline is the 6th trumpet war, World War III. Now, there are many scenarios that I could talk about, but the most heated scenario, which could probably lead to a nuclear war quickly, would be the U.S.-Iran military tensions right now. So the question is could this be a doorstep to the prophesied global nuclear war? And it's kind of hard for me to talk about it because I've never lived through a world war. So I don't even know how to talk about a world war. I've never been, I mean, you know, the last world war ended in 1945. I was born in 1968. So I'm a long way removed from the concentration camps and you know, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and things like that. I'm not familiar with any of that kind of stuff. Many people have lived most of their lives without thinking of a nuclear war as anything more than a distant threat or perhaps a plot device in a science fiction story. The day after, or, you know, those type of scenarios. And it's really been a long time since public attention has been focused on, quote unquote, the bomb. And the last time a nuclear weapon was detonated on a civilian population, again, all the way back in 1945, over 73 years ago. And even though we don't like to think about it, the threat of an increasing hostilities between Iran and the United States, it reminds us that the Bible prophesies the greatest war this world has ever known is just ahead of us. It's one of the next 2 prophecies on God's prophetic timeline. And this war will take place. Now, the Bible doesn't give us a scriptural answer one way or the other. But we know that this war will take place either just before or just shortly after the peace agreement is signed. So you can see how these things are coming down right now. The Bible does tell us that it must take place at the latest before the final 3.5 years begins. So really, it could take place, I mean, any time now. It's time on God's prophetic time clock. All of the prophecies that are supposed to occur before that, they've all occurred, every single one of them. And these are the next 2, the peace agreement and World War III. We call it World War III because World War I, 8.2 million killed. World War II, 52 million casualties. And World War III, the Bible says 1/3 of the world's population is going to be destroyed. You say, well, where in the world does it say that? Well, it's Revelation 9, verse 13 through 16. It contains the essence of the sixth trumpet war prophecy. If you want to read the whole thing, it's Revelation 9, 13 through 21. I'm going to read 13 through 16. The Bible says, and the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour a day, a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. Some translations say the third part of all of mankind. Okay? And the number of the army and the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. Now, you do understand this is the sixth, you understand the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 vials. This is the 6th trumpet. This is very important. The first 5 trumpets have already occurred. Okay, I want to let that one sink in for a moment. And think about this. The prophecy was given 2,000 years ago in the book of Revelation. The first trumpet, World War I, 1914 to 1919. That's when the first trumpet occurred. Since then, in about the last, 100 years now, the first 5 have occurred. So you can see the timing here. Prophecy given 2,000 years ago, the first 5 occurred. Those prophecies were fulfilled in the last 100 years. Now the 6th trumpet is staring us right in the face, everybody. And again, I've never been on the earth during a world war. My mind won't even go there to 52 million people dead, much less 1/3 of the world's population, or 2.5 billion to die. So think of it like this. In the broad scenario of prophecy here, there is another prophetically significant war ahead called the Battle of Armageddon. But this is not, these are 2 separate wars. Armageddon takes place after the Great Tribulation. Great Tribulation is the final 3.5 year period immediately preceding the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. And we know from its biblical context that the 6th trumpet war, this prophecy, is going to be fulfilled by a devastating war that takes place before the beginning of the Great Tribulation. I'm not going to take time to prove that. I could do that scripturally, but you just have to trust me on this one. So, if you examine the scripture more closely, we see that the 4 spirits bound in the river Euphrates are not released until God gives the word at the beginning of the 6th trumpet war. Well, 4 nations house the Euphrates River: Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. All 4 of these nations are at least 90% Islamic. And that means that Islam totally controls the Euphrates River region there. And the Bible says that the Euphrates River area is where the conflict will begin that will usher in the world war that will end up killing 1/3 of all of mankind. 1/3 of mankind would be 2.5 billion people, 40 times the number of people killed in World War II. But the war that's prophesied here, it's not going to be confined to the Euphrates River region. If we were to kill everybody, there's not a big enough population in this area to provide enough casualties for such a war. You can't find 2.5 billion people anywhere close to the Euphrates River area. But the conflict is going to start there. The prophecies are very, very clear. So it's going to start there. It's going to emanate out around the world. The Battle of Armageddon is going to be centralized right there in Israel proper. So, very important. 2 separate wars. So, the grisly subject of such a nuclear holocaust, it was renewed to the public attention recently when the United Nations Arms Research Chief warned just this month, May, that the risk of a nuclear weapons being used is at its highest point since World War II. Renata Dwan, director of the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, she admonished that all states with nuclear weapons have nuclear modernization programs underway. Every one of them. Dwan called it an urgent issue that the world should take more seriously. The United Nations Security Chief said that, I think that it's genuinely a call to recognize, and that it's been somewhat missing in the media, the coverage of these issues. That the risk of nuclear war are particularly high right now, and the risk of the use of nuclear weapons, for some of the factors that I pointed out, are higher now than at any time since World War II. So now that brings us to the hostility between Iran and the United States. It's escalated. It really escalated back in May of 2018. It was following the United States withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that Washington redoubled the pressure on Iran at the point. The U.S. categorized the Islamic Revolutionary Guard as a foreign terrorist organization and deployed a carrier strike group and a bomber task force with nuclear-capable B-52 bombers to the Middle East. And Iran responded by labeling the U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, as terrorist and declared that Tehran will suspend some of its voluntary obligations under the 2015 nuclear deal. So Iran also reacted by threatening to close the the Straits of Hormuz, where about a third of the world's oil exports, their vessels pass through. Earlier this month, the Pentagon deployed a Patriot missile defense battery and the USS Arlington to join the USS Abraham Lincoln and a U.S. Air Force bomber task force in the Middle East. So they're kind of ramping up here. Acting Secretary Defense Patrick Shanahan, he recently announced that the Pentagon is going to be sending an additional 1,500 American troops to the region, along with drones and fighter jets. So you can see things kind of heating up here. And we know that there's a war coming. Now, you say, is this going to be the war? I don't know. It's speculation at this point. But there are people that are saying we've got the highest chance for a nuclear war. It's the highest it's been since World War II right now because of what's going on and the heightened problems in the Middle East.
Many Christians admit end-time Bible prophecy is very complex and difficult to understand, and for some, a little bit scary. But what if you could understand Bible prophecy? What if you could know what will happen and how the United States will play a key role during end-time events? When you call today and get Understanding the End Time DVD curriculum, you can have peace about what is to come while understanding the prophetic events that appear in our headlines every day. When you call or go online to endtime.com and order, you'll learn the answer to the biggest prophecy question of all. Will the rapture take place, and when will it happen? This 14-part DVD series is the definitive end-time prophecy Bible study available. And for this limited time, you can get it for just $149. Don't miss this special offer. Understanding the End Time. Call now. 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME. Or go to endtime.com today.
So I'm going to move through here pretty quick because I want to make sure I get to something before I end the program. And if I don't get there, then I'll make sure I skip to that point because I want to talk to you about the military-industrial complex before this is over with. They may have a role in this. Pentagon officials said that they had credible reports that Iran and its proxies are planning to attack U.S. forces in the Middle East. Through direct combat, though direct combat has not yet begun, a war of words is already intensifying. And when they suspected that Iran was developing a nuclear bomb, you understand Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism on the planet, the United Nations, the European Union, and the United States imposed sanctions with the goal of convincing Iran to scale back its sensitive nuclear activities. Even though Iran asserted that its nuclear program was entirely peaceful, it reached a deal with 6 countries back in 2015, which was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Iran agreed to limit its uranium enrichment, redesign a heavy water reactor under construction, and to allow inspections by the global watchdog. Well, in return, sanctions were lifted, which allowed Iran to resume exporting oil as its main source of revenue. And U.S. President Donald Trump has called the agreement the horrible and laughable, disastrous deal with Iran, and one of the worst, most one-sided transactions the United States ever entered into. Well, back in May of 2018, the Trump administration abandoned the JCPOA deal and began reimposing sanctions. So you can understand what Iran's, their mental attitude is towards that. The sanctions targeted oil and financial sectors in Iran and produced an economic meltdown with soaring inflation, while Iran reacted by reducing its commitments under the nuclear deal. It gave the 5 countries still party to the deal 60 days to protect Iranian oil sales from the U.S. sanctions. Otherwise, Iran would suspend its restrictions on uranium enrichment and cancel the redesign of that heavy water reactor. Well, President Trump wants to broaden the deal to restrict Iran's ballistic missile program and its involvement in Middle East conflicts. Well, of course, Iran is refusing to negotiate. So then a question has to be asked, is Iran restarting its nuclear program? Well, on May 20th, just a week or so ago, Iran announced that it had quadrupled production at its Natanz low enrichment site. Iran has kept the Era heavy water reactor inactive, while it's still capable of restarting its prohibitive functions. And it is reported that Iran is slowly reviving banned elements of its nuclear program, so that if tensions escalate rapidly with the United States, the preparations could be revived on very short notice. And more recently, the Trump administration has attempted to establish back-channel exploratory talks with Iran. But it doesn't yet look like that's going to be hopeful. Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi and Omani Foreign Minister Yusuf bin Alawi volunteered in late May 2019 to assist with the mediation, but the Trump team has not accepted their offers. White House advisors have instead approached a Swiss diplomat and Iraq's President Bahrain to go as go-betweens for their first U.S.-Iranian exploratory talks. Now, this is what I want to talk to you about. Listen very closely. One of the things, anyway. That voters are beset by endless wars. You understand that the United States was not in a foreign war until World War I. Since then, we've been in one ever since. And pretty much ever since. President Trump has to keenly be aware that one of his most resonant campaign promises was to put a stop to what he called the country's endless wars. He understands what's going on. Substantial numbers of voters, and remember, we're going into election now, substantial numbers of voters beset by almost 2 decades of war were voicing their opposition to serious military involvement overseas. Well, President Trump, speaking about hostile foreign wars, Iran especially, he told Fox News recently that if he can solve tensions economically, he prefers that to a military solution. And of course, all of us would. But, this is very important, check this out. But he said he's up against a military-industrial complex in Washington that wants to keep the wars going. You say, well, who in the world would want to keep wars ongoing? Well, think about all of the arms contractors, Raytheon, some of the big ones, Lockheed Martin, all of them that are creating bombs and guns and all these different things. They have huge contracts through the Pentagon and different places. Look up the military-industrial complex and what it's all about. There are people that they make money off of war. And they don't want us to disengage and bring all our boys home. Donald Trump actually stated, he said, well, I'm the one that talks about these wars that are 19 years old, and people are just there. And don't kid yourself. Now, I'm quoting Donald Trump. Don't kid yourself. You do have a military-industrial complex, and they do like war. He said, in Syria, and I'm quoting, in Syria, with the caliphate, Donald Trump claims that he wiped out 100% of the caliphate. That doesn't mean you're not going to have these crazy people going around blowing up stores and blowing up things. But he said, these are seriously ill people. But I wiped out 100% of the caliphate. Then he said, after doing that, Donald Trump said, I want to bring our troops back home. And he said, the place around me went crazy. He said, he said, you have people here in Washington, they never want to leave. He said, I know you know what I'll do. But he said, I'd leave a couple hundred soldiers behind. But if it was up to these individuals, this military-industrial complex, they'd bring thousands of soldiers back in. Donald Trump actually said this. He said, someday people will explain it. But you do have a group, and they call it the military-industrial complex. So Donald Trump would pull our guys out if he could. But there are people in Washington, and it's like these big arms contractors and things. They put huge amounts of money into these lobbyists and different things that have huge influence on Washington. And Donald Trump, the President of the United States, actually said, I'd like to bring people home, but there are people that went around me that went crazy. They wanted to take thousands of people back in. So you kind of got to understand what's going on behind the scenes here. You can look it up. Look up Donald Trump's military-industrial complex comments. So there are today advocates of a more aggressive foreign policy that would prefer to present a more credible threat of war to America's enemies. So you understand what's going on here? The Bible prophesies of a war that will kill 1/3 of the world's population just in the very near future. And we've got this scenario with Iran and the United States right now, and with Donald Trump being very aggressive and saying, he's saying, hey, I would bring them home. I really don't want war, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to allow you to get nuclear weapons. And Iran has balked at that. They're fighting about it. They're fighting the sanctions. And it appears that they may be heading back towards getting nuclear weapons. So, question is, do we take war off the table? According to front page contributor Bruce Thornton, Democratic leaders and even elements of the Trump administration want to take war off the table. And that means that they are satisfied to threaten military action that retaliates or deters rather than choosing to demonstrate a credible threat of war. And President Trump's actually said, we don't want a war with Iran. And I don't want to fight, but we can't let Iran have nuclear weapons. So he's saying, I don't want to fight, but at the end of the day, we are not going to allow you to have nuclear weapons. And then, of course, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, he said that we fundamentally do not seek war with Iran. Also, there are State Department officials and many other people that don't want a war with Iran. So what I wanted to do was to big picture this for you today. You understand that if you go to the internet, if you watch your nightly news, if you're looking at magazines, if you're looking at newspapers, in every one of them, you can find these two scenarios, the peace agreement and any news source. They're talking about the peace agreement, or they're talking about what's going on with Iran and Israel, or Iran and the United States, the tensions in the Middle East. There's fixing to be a huge conference coming up, a couple different conferences. One with Vladimir Putin, Trump, and Netanyahu in Israel concerning tensions in the Middle East. And there's also fixing to be one in Saudi Arabia. They're going to have a big conference concerning tensions with Iran. And so it's very important you understand what's going on here. Prophetically speaking, the next two events to occur are this peace agreement and it's going to be a nuclear war. Read the prophecy. You'll see what I'm saying, how they're killed and everything. There's no way you could destroy that many people without nuclear. I mean, we're talking about 40 times World War II. And so it's going to be a nuclear war, and it's going to emanate out of the Middle East region. Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran. That's where it's going to start. Now, it's going to end up spreading around the world, but it's going to start right there. And look at the tensions going on there as we speak. And so you can understand from a prophetic standpoint, looking at it through the lens of prophecy, that we are following this on a daily basis, because obviously until we live through these things, and you know, many people think that when 9/11 happened that we started the war on terrorism, that we entered into World War III at that point. And really, like I said, until we live through it, we're not going to know exactly how all this plays out. But I can tell you what the Bible says is going to happen. There is going to be a peace agreement in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And it will create a two-state solution or an autonomous situation. It is going to allow them to build their third temple. All the characteristics allow them to, the Jews living out in the West Bank, to live out there under Palestinian jurisdiction. There is going to be one signed in the near future. Will it be Donald Trump's peace agreement? We don't know that at this point. It could be, but we don't know until we know what's in it. And there is a war coming that will kill 1/3 of the world's population. We do know that from the prophecies of the Bible. The prophecies of the Bible always come to pass. It's the 6th trumpet war. The first 5 trumpets have already occurred. So that's why we follow this on a day-to-day basis. We've got a research team that follows this every day because we know it's coming. These are the next 2 prophetic events to occur beyond the establishment of a world government, world religion, and everything else. Precursors to the mark of the beast. We follow all of this stuff. But I wanted to kind of big picture it here right at the end, because you and I are the generation that these things will occur in our lifetime. We're in the end time, everybody.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.